My parents asked me to give $25,000 to my sister for IVF, but their years of betrayal and lies made me cut them off instead. I, 29, female, have an older sister named Schwell, 30 female, who's a big loser in her life. Yet my parents have always favored her like she's their only child. Our entire life, Schwell has been resentful of my existence since she sort of made it up in her head that I was always trying to steal her spotlight. So, she made it her life mission to step on everything I ever enjoyed doing. Our rivalry was not in a normal sibling way. Let me explain. In essence, whenever I delved into mastering a new skill, she felt the need to follow suit. If I learned archery, you could bet that Schwell would show up at school with a bow and arrows, saying how she was interested in archery as well. Whenever I wrote in my diary about having a crush on a guy, she would miraculously start talking to the very same guy the next day and act all flirty with him. If I tried to lose weight by adopting a healthier lifestyle, Schwell would immediately jump on the bandwagon, attempting the same diet and exercise routine. It became a pattern, my personal choices mirrored in her actions. It wasn't just about hobbies and habits, it extended to friendships and social circles. If I befriended someone, Schwell would attempt to integrate herself into the same group, sometimes even going to great lengths to overshadow my presence. The incessant copying began to take a toll on my individuality and sense of self. Despite my frustration, voicing my concerns to my parents proved futile. They would respond by saying things like, "Sisters imitate each other," and it was deemed inappropriate to try to control or gatekeep her interests. It seemed like my parents liked the fact that we were both always competing and kept each other on our toes. But what they failed to understand was that I was struggling to have something just for myself. Although Schwell would consistently keep a close eye on my activities, always trying to one-up me, in reality, this wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want to compete with her, I just wanted to do my own thing in peace. But Schwell would show up, trying to compete with me and unnecessarily create this drama. There was also more praise that followed Schwell ultimately, even if I was the one who had been more interested in the activity. I remember my parents would miss work to attend her recitals, yet they would forget about mine. It's like they thought the world would stop if they missed her important moments, but when it came to mine, it suddenly didn't matter so much. Hence, as you can understand, Schwell reveled in this spotlight. She would take every chance to taunt me about how much our parents loved her more. She would make negative comments towards me under her breath whenever we were around our parents. If I reacted in any way, she would pretend that she had no idea what instigated me. Whenever our parents weren't around, she was a bit more callous and told me how I should just kill myself since no one would bother looking for my body or miss me when I was gone. She would tell me that I should stop trying because I would always come second to her in everything in life. Her antics didn't just stop there. She has physically bullied me in our school 4 to 5 times by either purposefully tripping me in front of everyone or hitting me and justifying how it was just a dare by her friends. When my teachers found out, they immediately called on my parents to complain and threatened Schwell with suspension. My parents would tell the administration that this was a family matter and they would handle it at home. But at home, Schwell would pretend like I had done something to instigate her, which is why she had behaved that way with me. She was never once reprimanded by either parent, and if our parents ever questioned her, she would start crying, saying how I was making up everything because I was jealous of her. My friends started calling Schwell out for her abusive behavior towards me, and this is when Schwell started spreading rumors about me. She would show up to school with bruises around her thighs or a cut on her forearm, saying how I was doing those things to her when our parents were not around. Because I was an introvert and didn't like talking about my business with others, it was difficult for me to fight back against her malicious rumors. Schwell would talk to every friend I ever talked with, or the guy I liked, to make them believe her lies. As you can imagine, my high school life was hell, and it continued to be hell even after Schwell graduated high school before me. Because she took a gap year as she wasn't getting admission to any university due to her low grades. When it came time for me to go to college, I got a scholarship so my parents didn't have to spend a single dime for me. This is when I found out my parents were talking to Schwell about how they had saved college funds for both of us, but because I didn't need them anymore, they were happy to spend both of our college funds on her. They told her that she was free to study anything that she wanted. I was furious to hear this, but when I confronted them about it, they told me that it was their money and they wished to help out Schwell since she needed it more than me. I tried to reason with them, saying how they could save my college fund and gift it to me for my business or my marriage, but my parents scoffed, saying that I should learn to take care of myself because they were tired of babying me. I remember crying myself to sleep that night because it was heartbreaking to realize how Schwell would get everything in life while I would be ignored forever. When I moved into my college dorm, I made sure to move everything so I wouldn't have to come back home. My parents didn't even help me move, which by this time wasn't that surprising. When I was at my lowest, I met Fahad, who changed my life. Fahad was a breath of fresh air in the suffocating environment I had left behind. We met during one of the orientation events, and his genuine kindness and warm smile immediately drew me in. As we got to know each other, Fahad became my anchor, providing the stability and support that I had always desperately needed. He listened to my story without judgment and offered a comforting presence. During one of my college breaks, my parents wanted me to come back since they had invited everyone for a Christmas celebration. I didn't want to face my parents alone, so I invited Fahad to go with me, since I thought this would be a good chance for me to introduce him to my family. I informed my parents beforehand that my boyfriend and I would be staying separately and that he would be joining us for dinner. When I arrived for dinner with Fahad, my parents were a bit surprised to see him. For the sake of the story, it's important to mention that my parents are conservative, so they obviously judged my boyfriend's appearance. After I introduced him, I knew this, so I had already informed Fahad about it. Fahad greeted them warmly and even got a bouquet for my mom. This instantly warmed my mother toward him, as she was taken aback by his kindness. The whole night, everyone fawned over Fahad, as he made everyone fall in love with him with intelligent quips. He complimented the food, engaged in polite conversation, and even offered a heartfelt toast to my parents, expressing his gratitude for welcoming him into their home. Some of my cousins came up to me to say how I was lucky to have found such a guy and to ask if he had any younger brothers, which made me laugh. I was happy that everyone loved my boyfriend, yet I could see Schwell's scowling face and her disdain grow bigger and bigger through the night. I noticed her having multiple drinks and engaging in hushed conversations with a few relatives. Schwell's discomfort with Fahad's presence was evident, and I could sense that she was brewing something beneath the surface. During dinner, out of nowhere, Schwell loudly asked me in front of everyone if I was in a serious relationship with Fahad. Her loud remark made everyone turn their attention to us. I nodded my head and, without hesitation, took Fahad's hand and told her that we were, in fact, quite serious. Schwell smirked and insinuated that maybe I needed to settle down with someone who was more aligned with our family's tradition and not an outsider. Her blatant racism was shocking. Some of the guests were taken aback by her bold entitlement. Schwell slightly went on to say how I needed to think about our cultural differences and that, as a member of this family, I should find someone more aligned with our values. I was so pissed hearing this and was about to give her a piece of my mind when Fahad, unfazed by her comments, smiled and informed her that he was as much of an American as everyone else since he was born in this country. He firmly told her how his great-grandparents had come to America and how his family had taught him to respect everyone's cultures and beliefs. I felt insulted by how Fahad had to explain his stance to my family, but seeing how calm he was in handling Schwell's negative comments made me even more sure that he was the right partner for me. As you can imagine, after this awkward conversation, people didn't have a good impression of Schwell, and they didn't appreciate how she had called my boyfriend out in front of everyone else. The rest of the night, Schwell spent alone, drinking from her glass and fuming. After we left back for college, I sent a long message to Schwell saying how I was ashamed of having her as a sister, and that I hoped she would stay away from my life since I never wanted to acknowledge that I was related to her. She sent back a short message saying, "Same here." Since that day, I have had no contact with her at all. Fahad and I went on to graduate college, and both have successful careers. Currently, 3 years ago, we got married. I had invited my parents, but not Schwell. No matter how much my mother tried to convince me otherwise, I had decided to have an extravagant wedding. My parents seemed surprised at how nice everything was. My mom looked amazed, and my dad, who usually doesn't talk much, was quiet during the celebration. My parents met Fahad's family and friends. They realized Fahad's family had a lot of money, and the wedding showed it. The difference in wealth between Fahad's family and mine was clear. After the wedding, my parents talked to me. They were surprised by how much money was spent, and Fahad's family's wealth. My mom asked about our finances, and I explained that Fahad and I could afford a nice wedding because we had built a good life together. I reassured them that even though Fahad's family was rich, our marriage was not just about money since I earned quite well too. In retrospect, I can see how this was a big mistake to mention to my parents about our finances. 2 years ago, my parents reached out to me saying they needed my help. They explained that since my dad was retired and they didn't have any savings left, as they had used up everything for renovating their house recently, they wanted me to help them out financially. I was taken aback by their asking since this was unusual of them, but I also have to admit, being the black sheep of the family, it felt good to be needed. They continued to tell me how they would be happy if they could receive $3,000 every month, which would help them pay for various bills around the house and also help pay for their medical expenses as they were getting older. At that time, I had a good job and Fahad and I were doing well financially. We didn't have children, and I was earning a good salary. At that moment, I didn't think much and agreed to help my parents. Like a fool, I felt a sense of responsibility and wanted to support my parents, thinking that they genuinely needed my help. So I started sending them the money. Every month. When Fahad found out about it, he was confused, saying that $3,000 was a big amount for my parents to need every month. But we wanted to be supportive. It became a routine, and I never asked them what they spent the money on. During this time, my relationship with my parents improved considerably. I don't know if they were pretending just to be nice to my face since they wanted me to send them my money, but I thought we were really bonding. I started thinking about how I could forgive them for all their past actions, and we could finally move forward to a better future as a family. 2 weeks ago, out of nowhere, my parents called me multiple times in the middle of my workday. They knew how busy I would be at work, so seeing their multiple missed calls, I thought it was an emergency. I immediately called them back. My dad asked me to come over, saying they needed to talk to me, and I agreed. That evening, when I arrived at my parents' house, tired after work, they seemed quite anxious. I asked them if something was wrong, and they started the conversation by saying how thankful they were for the financial support that they had been receiving from me. I nodded, looking at them, confused. Then my mom began to share some news. She explained that Shwell, who had gotten married 2 years ago, had been facing infertility issues for a very long time. The couple had been struggling a lot, but after a while she had finally gotten pregnant. Unfortunately, it ended in a miscarriage, leaving Shwell traumatized. I sat there stunned, since this was all news to me. I had no idea that she was even married to begin with, let alone that she was trying for children. My parents went on to say that Shwell was now considering in vitro fertilization IVF to increase her chances of having a child. However, the procedure was expensive, and they needed $25,000 for it. They looked at me with hopeful eyes and told me that, as her sister, it should be my duty to help her out. They continued to say how this was the least I could do for Shwell since she was family, and family needs to help each other out. I listened attentively, but when they made the request, I was floored. I couldn't fathom how I was responsible for covering such a significant expense, especially given the complicated history between Shwell and me. I reminded them that Shwell and I were never siblings to begin with, as she had bullied me all my life, and there was absolutely no way that I could give her such a significant amount as a gift. This response didn't sit well with my parents. They started insisting that, as Shwell's sister, it was my duty to help her become a mother. They argued that since I didn't have children of my own, the least I could do was contribute to bringing a grandbaby into the family. As a compromise, I calmly explained that I sympathized with the situation, but I was not going to give her any money as a gift. I added that if she wanted the money, I would be willing to give her $25,000 as a loan, only after she agreed to sign a legally binding contract, which would explicitly state that she would have to pay me back or I could take her to court over it. My parents started yelling when they heard this. They told me that it was offensive for me to even suggest such an idea since I had so much money just lying around. My mom told me that I should not be selfish and that my sister needed this money more than me. I was livid at their entitlement and audacity. I reminded them that I was the one who had worked hard my entire life to earn this much, and I had my own life to lead and financial responsibilities to manage. I couldn't simply allocate such a substantial amount of money for someone who had made my life miserable and whom I hadn't been in contact with for years. I told them that if they didn't agree to my demands, then they should not expect me to give them any money. Hearing this, my parents started screaming that this was why they disliked me so much, because I was always so arrogant and always thought I was superior to everyone else. I was taken aback by their harsh words when, until a moment ago, they were begging me for money. Despite their attempts to guilt-trip me, I stood my ground. I couldn't help but feel suspicious about all the money that I had been sending them. I excused myself to use the restroom. I knew I had a very short period of time, so I quietly tiptoed to my parents' room and discovered my dad's phone left on the bedside table, connected to the charger. I know it was wrong, but I couldn't shake off the pit in my stomach, so I checked his messages. This is how I found the transaction messages of $1,800 being sent every month to my sister for the last 2 years. I couldn't believe my eyes as my suspicion was finally confirmed. The betrayal struck me like a cold wind. It wasn't just a financial deceit, it was the fact that they had been dishonest with me, manipulating my emotions for the last 2 years. My heart pounded as I realized the extent of their deception. I went back downstairs to my parents. I didn't even bother hiding how betrayed I was feeling. I straight up asked my parents where they had been spending the $3,000 that I had been sending them every month. My parents looked surprised when I suddenly asked them this question. They stammered, attempting to come up with an explanation. I confronted them about the transactions to my sister, pointing out the regular transfers of $1,800 every month. Their faces turned pale, and for a moment, they were lost for words. In that tense silence, the truth unraveled. My parents admitted to diverting a significant portion of the money I had been sending for the past 2 years to Shwell. They justified it by claiming that Schwell needed the money, and as parents, they couldn't watch her suffer. I looked at them, furious, hearing their pathetic excuse, and asked them, "Then what about me? You didn't feel bad about taking the money from me for the last 2 years while lying to me?" They started to say how Schwell and her husband both had low-paying jobs, but seeing as how I had such an extravagant wedding and a good-paying job to depend on, they thought taking this money from me wouldn't harm me. They continued to say that this was originally Schwell's idea, and they had gone along with it since they thought they were only trying to do what was best for their children. Fueled by a mix of anger and disappointment, I decided I had endured enough. I declared that I would no longer be sending them any money and that I was cutting off all financial ties. My parents, desperate and angry, immediately started to tell me that I just couldn't do that and that I should not abandon my family when they needed my help. I scoffed at them and walked out. Walking away from their home that day, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a profound sense of liberation. As I am writing this, I continue to receive calls from my parents begging me not to do this to them and promising not to send Schwell any more money. If I permanently cut off my parents after how they have betrayed me. Update 1. Thanks for all the wonderful and helpful comments. I won't lie, familial pressure and guilt were getting to me a little because I realized how fortunate I have been to have met such a wonderful husband like Fahad. I feel very emotional knowing that, finally, my childhood stories are being believed. It's been hard for me to talk about, as many believe I'm being disingenuous or overdramatic. So really, thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I have talked to Fahad about everything, and he's extremely disappointed with how my parents have tried to fool me and take money from me for the last 2 years. We have discussed that this is not going to happen again, even if my parents are on their deathbed. Meanwhile, the calls and messages from my parents persist. They alternate between pleading, expressing remorse, and attempting to guilt-trip me into reconsidering my decision. Despite their efforts, I remain resolute in my decision of no contact. Update 2. So, it's been 2 weeks since I last updated. This past weekend, Schwell decided to reach out to me, which was very unexpected since I had no idea she even had my number after all these years. Instead of being even a bit remorseful, she sent me a lengthy message accusing me of being entitled and childish. She expressed how she had hated me all her life, calling me a gold digger who married Fahad just for money. She insisted that I had no right to have so much money just for myself and that, as my family, they had every right to it. In her message, she even wished that she had bullied me more during our childhood so that I would never forget what she was capable of. Reading her words made me feel sick and I started to cry. All my past trauma was resurfacing. I showed the message to Fahad, who was furious. Fahad told me that he had had enough and decided to take matters into his own hands. He created a messenger group with my parents, Schwell, relatives, and cousins. He sent screenshots of Schwell's messages and explained that he had to step in because Schwell and my parents were threatening and pressuring me to continue giving them $3,000. He revealed the lies they had told me for the last 2 years, detailing Schwell's history of bullying me throughout my childhood. As you can imagine, in a matter of a few hours, all hell broke loose. We received immediate responses from relatives expressing disbelief at how low my parents could stoop to try to take advantage of me. Everyone was shocked at how shameless Schwell was for her actions. I also received calls from several of them where I shared with them how my parents had admitted to sending Schwell $1,800 every month from the money I was providing them. Everyone was quite appalled, and as a result, my parents started receiving severe backlash. They reached out to me and asked me to delete the group and unsend the messages. But Fahad told them firmly that he had created this group and that he was done with all their lies. He warned them that the next time they ever came crawling to beg us for money, he would use all his money and power to hire the best lawyers and sue them into oblivion. They got quite nervous hearing this and haven't dared to reach out to me since. Since then, I have heard from my relatives that my parents are extremely embarrassed and even admonish Schwell for the first time for everything she has done to me. They are apparently extremely remorseful after her messages were exposed in the screenshots, and realizing that she was, in fact, a bully, just like I had always complained to them about. In my opinion, regardless of how they feel, it's too late for reconciliation. I plan to continue with the no-contact approach and live my life peacefully with my husband. Update 3, I just want to say to all of you that you are absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for your support. If I could, I would respond to each of you individually, but unfortunately, I don't have the finger strength for that. In just a matter of a few days since my last update, I have received support from so many of you. I have to say that Fahad and I are thinking about talking to a therapist who can help me deal with the tough feelings of cutting off my parents and the betrayal by my family. The help and kindness from cousins and relatives are making me feel more sure about my choice. Neither my parents nor Shwell have contacted me, and I know that, after Fahad's warning, it's going to stay that way. As I go on, I really want to take care of myself and think about the good things in my life, like being with Fahad. The road ahead might be hard, but with the right people around me, I believe things will get better. I hope this can be my last update.